properly integrate Google Mobile Ads SDK using iOS, you need to configure a few dependencies and security settings. In this video, we will configure the iOS GAM project dependencies, integrate the Google Mobile Ads and OpenWrap SDKs, set up the ATS, App Transport Security, and finally, configure the SKAdNetwork to track performance. In addition to this video, we have an OpenWrap iOS GAM guide you can use to complement the content. The material covered in this video is documented there and may help with questions you might have. You will find the links to the guide within our community page in the video description. Now that we've got that covered, let's start by reviewing the dependencies needed for our project. Currently, OpenWrap SDK supports using Xcode within iOS. Please feel free to check the OpenWrap iOS Required Dependencies section to confirm the latest release. You will also need to ensure you have your publisher and placement details in place, including your publisher ID, your OpenWrap profile ID, and your OpenWrap DFP ad unit IDs. You can find definitions for these terms in our AdTech glossary on the Pubmatic community. In addition to the glossary, we've provided a few Pubmatic test profiles you can use during your integration. The profiles are located within the iOS guide. Just be aware they should be used only during integration. Log into the Publisher UI with your Pubmatic account to create an OpenWrap profile. We will not cover this in this video, however, the documentation provided can help guide you. Next, you need to set up GAM's ad server integrations to allow OpenWrap access to your winning bids. This involves setting up a new order and line item within your GAM platform. You can find out how to add these entries within the OpenWrap iOS integration guide. Now that we have our dependency information, let's now start integrating the Google Mobile Ads SDK for Ad Manager. Before integrating OpenWrap SDK, we must set up Google Mobile Ads SDK. Let's switch over to Terminal to see how this is done. For this setup, we will be using CocoaPods to help manage our Xcode project dependency, or wherever you've created your Xcode project file. If you need help setting up CocoaPods, use the iOS guide to install and configure the tool. First, we need to create a pod file for our Xcode directory. Let's do this by navigating our project directory and initializing our pod. Next, we need to add the Google Mobile Ads SDK dependency. By default, we'll be pulling down the latest version using this command, but you can choose a specific version if you need to by placing a comma after the pod name. That's it for Google Mobile Ads SDK. Let's now add the dependencies for OpenWrap SDK and the GAM event handlers. When integrating OpenWrap SDK, you can either use CocoaPods to manage your projects, or you can integrate manually. For this video, we will not cover the manual integration, but feel free to check the iOS guide to see the steps needed for that sort of integration. Using our pod file, we will add the following lines of code to point to our OpenWrap SDK dependencies and GAM event handlers, which allow our SDKs to communicate. At this point, you should now have 3 new entries in your pod file that look similar to this. You'll see we have the platform iOS and version. We are linking to our Xcode project, in this case, sample app. And finally, pointing to our Google Mobile Ads, OpenWrap SDKs, and event handler. Once completed, Save your pod file. Finally, let's run the pod install command to install all dependencies for the project. Now that you have your project set up, you can move forward with setting up your banner or interstitial ads. We have documented this information within the guide provided in the links and video content, so check it out when you have a moment. We have our dependencies in place and project ready to go. Let's now look at the app transport security settings to ensure our traffic communicates within our integration. By default, OpenWrap SDK sends and receives secure ad calls using ATS, and SDKs for iOS 9.0 and greater require it. Developers, however, can opt out of this by using the app's NSAllowsArbitraryLoads key and setting the value to true in info.plist. Simply open your app's info.plist file and add the following ATS settings. That's all that's required to configure your app transport security settings within iOS using Google Mobile Ads SDK. Let's now look at how to configure the SKAdNetwork ad attribution option. OpenWrap SDK supports SKAdNetwork to let demand partners track performance of campaigns while retaining user privacy. In order to set up the SKAdNetwork attribution, you first need to update the SKAdNetwork items key with additional network ID dictionary entries in the appinfo.plist. Within the OpenWrap SDK integration guide, we have an updated list of SKAdNetwork ad network IDs you can download. Please check the video description for links to those files. Let's click the info.plist entry in Xcode. Then click the plus sign in the Property List Manager and hit Return. Now type in the key name, SKAdNetwork items, into the field. Choose the array option and enter the dictionary entry as follows. You've successfully integrated OpenWrap SDK with SKAdNetwork. As mentioned before, we have provided a few sample apps you can use that will help with your integration. We highly recommend looking at these apps and feel free to use them as you start building your integrations. That's it. The OpenWrap and GAM SDKs are now integrated within your project and ready to compile in your app. Feel free to check the display banner or display interstitial ad documentation in the OpenWrap SDK integration guide for details about adding ad formats to your app. Also, if you have questions, feel free to contact your account manager who can help you. Thanks for choosing PubMatic, and happy integrating.